Okay, in this video I'm going to take a look at how we might remap a reasonably typical EDC17. I've got the same VW Tiguan file open that I've used in previous videos. I've opened it roughly at the driver's wish map area, so we've got what is probably driver's wish map 1, 2, 3 and 4, possibly reverse, and I suspect that may well be all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. Now, if we open one of these, obviously we look at it as numbers, because text and numbers is what we're going to want to look at if we're going to look at mapping. We can see the basic information that we might want to change. Now, I could make the changes here in Windows, but it's more difficult to explain what I'm doing and why when I'll make the changes in Windows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to an Excel version. Excuse me. Now there's exactly the same information, but I've just displayed it in an Excel file. I've put a note to myself here basically to say to anybody reading this or listening to me that you should not be starting here. In other words, you need to be sure that you're fairly confident with something like EDC15 and EDC16 before you move on to looking at this guide and EDC17. Not because you can't do it, but simply because I am making assumptions as I go through this guide that I do not have to go into every little bit of detail, because I'm assuming that somebody either reading or watching this already has a grasp of basic mapping. So what we're doing here is we're improving on what they already know, and hopefully not using this as a starting point. Right, okay, now let's have a look then. So what we've got here is the original driver's wish map, and we've got engine speed in revs per minute down the side. We've got accelerator pedal pressure going up to 100% along this axis, and then these are the output values in torque. And so obviously the more we press the pedal, the more revs we get, and so the result of that is more torque, more power, more fuel being used. So if we look at these figures, basically you can ignore figures over here and you can ignore figures over here, because it's unlikely that you'll do anything other than start somewhere in this region and slowly work your way across the middle like this when you're driving the vehicle. Because if you think about it, you're gradually pressing the accelerator pedal and the engine speed is rising more or less with that, so that's roughly the way you will move across. So although these figures here might be much higher, you're not really interested in right over here. You're more interested in this area over here. And in fact, you could argue that being a diesel, you're not even interested in this area right over in the corner. You could argue that the tunable area is perhaps more like this area here. But I'll leave that for you to decide, because it's pointless me telling you what you should or shouldn't tune. I'm just giving you a view of how you could tune, and then what you choose to do as a result of that is up to you. Now over on this side I've got the same map, and what I've done is it's nothing clever. I've said to that cell that I want you to be that cell multiplied by 1, so the result is the same. That cell is that cell multiplied by 1. The reason I've done that is it means I can speed up changes over here, because when I get to this here, I've changed it to multiply by 1.05. In other words, this number's 5% bigger than the one that's over here. And so is this one, and so is this one, and so is this one, and so on. In other words, all the orange numbers, assuming your screen shows them as orange, but all these orange numbers are 5% increased. And then all the red ones, they've been changed by 1.1, so they're 10% increased. The blue ones, as you can see, are 15% increased, and finally this little block here, they've got a 20% increase. It doesn't matter how you choose to do this. I mean, you can decide that what you want is a sudden 20% increase right here, and that's it, job done. I prefer playing with a small change as I go across. In other words, I prefer to end up with a car that smoothly accelerates and decelerates as I drive it. I do not like cars that suddenly have a massive kick in the back. But of course, some people love that, so they would deliberately tune their car so that it gives them a kick in the back at a particular point. So how you choose to do this is entirely up to you. Right, now what I'll do is I'll stop there, because it's going to be a lot easier if I do this in little chunks than to make one video that goes on for ages. A, it's hard work for me, and B, it's boring if you're listening to me drone on and on. So I'll stop there. It would be helpful if it did actually stop. Why has that not stopped?